But just to clarify, like what chronic diseases do you believe are related to a lack of nitric oxide?
Well, we know that cardiovascular disease is a result or consequence of insufficient nitric oxide production. And that's the number one killer of men and women worldwide, which is huge. And then, but what we're seeing, there's a hierarchy of symptoms and diseases that develop. And so we'll go through this because I think, our body talks to us. We just have to listen. And, and so typically the first symptoms that occur when our body becomes compromised in the ability to produce nitric oxide is erectile dysfunction. Because if we lose the ability to dilate the blood vessels of the sex organs in both men and women, we develop sexual dysfunction or erectile dysfunction. And it's not just a male disease, it's a female disorder as well. And then number two, our blood pressure starts to go up. And today, 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. And this is due to an inability to produce nitric oxide to dilate the blood vessels. So when you can't make nitric oxide, your blood vessels become smaller. Now you've got the same volume of blood going through smaller pipes, and simple laws of physics tell us that pressure goes up. And then number three, you start to develop insulin resistance and diabetes. So type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is a symptom of nitric oxide deficiency. Because when insulin binds to the insulin receptors on the cell to bring glucose into the cell, that cell has to be able to make nitric oxide. And if it can't, the cell becomes resistant to insulin resistance. And then we develop diabetes. And then number four, you start to develop exercise intolerance. Can't maintain an exercise regimen and get short of breath walking across the room or up a flight of steps. And then fifthly, you start to get mild cognitive impairment, dementia, and Alzheimer's. Because again, Alzheimer's is a metabolic vascular disease. It's diabetes type 3, it's insulin resistance in the brain, and it's focal ischemia. And so when we give nitric oxide, we improve glucose uptake, we perfuse the brain, and we don't get misfolding of proteins, we don't get amyloid plaque or tau tangles, and we don't lose our memory.
Uh, Pretty important stuff there. Do you ever marvel that it's 2026? The number one killer in America is still heart disease. Yet it was, 60, 70 years ago that we decided the problem was cholesterol and that, developing drugs like statins, lowering cholesterol. We've been at this for decades and decades. Yet today, the number one killer of Americans is still heart disease after all this time. Does it ever just strike you as super bizarre?
No, it does, because as you mentioned, I spent 25 years in academia. I mean, understanding and trying to develop discover a mechanism of action of what leads to cardiovascular disease or heart disease. And nowhere in the mechanism of cardiovascular disease is cholesterol a culprit. You know why our body makes cholesterol? Because we need it. And the people who live the longest have cholesterol between 240 and 260. But yet today, physicians want to get your cholesterol below 200. And if cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease, why are we targeting it? And all you have to do is look at the numbers. And the statins, the HMG CoA reductase inhibitors, which these are inhibiting the rate limiting step in cholesterol synthesis in the human body, were approved in the late 80s. And the American Heart Association, there was a lot of excitement around there because associations, there's some associations, although they're very poor associations. So the American Heart Association said, if we can treat cholesterol with these statins, and these are in the late 80s, by the turn of the century, by the year 2000, we will completely eradicate cardiovascular disease. And what we've tracked over the years are the number of what we call PCIs, percutaneous coronary interventions. And in the 1980s, we were doing about 300 to 400 of those over about a 4-year period. And now if you look today, we're doing about 1,600 PCIs per year in the US. So number one, treating cholesterol has not affected, in fact, it's accelerated the rate of cardiovascular disease. It's accelerated the rate of all-cause mortality because if you don't have cholesterol, you can't make vitamin D, you become immunocompromised. If you can't make cholesterol, you can't make estrogen in women, you can't make testosterone in men. There's an epidemic of hormone disorders, and you can't maintain the integrity of the cell membrane because this bilipid or this phospholipid bilayer, you have to have cholesterol in there to maintain a cellular potential, to maintain the insulator effects and the intracellular, the transmembrane signal transduction. So lowering cholesterol is probably the worst thing I could ever imagine doing for human physiology. Yet if you go to your primary care doctor or cardiologist, they want to put you on a cholesterol lowering medication. But yet they're ignoring the data because what I look at is risk benefit. What are the benefits of lowering cholesterol versus the risk? And what are the benefits? There are no benefits. If you look at the dozens of trials and the meta-analysis in primary, secondary, tertiary prevention of cardiovascular disease, there is no benefit. What's the risk? Diabetes, muscle aches and pains and cramps. They're mitochondrial toxicants. They're causing cancers. So in any decision you make, if there's no benefit and it's all risk, that's a very easy quotient. You don't do it. And that's the frustration. And I think it's one of the biggest myths ever perpetuated in the medical sciences that cholesterol causes heart disease. And it
Yeah.
doesn't. So why are we treating it? And I think today it's malpractice. It's negligence and malpractice to give patients cholesterol-lowering medications for the treatment of heart disease.
Strong statement, but I agree with you 100%. I think that is the linchpin that the entire medical and pharmaceutical companies have to rely on to this day and keep that, kind of lie going. So
It's
many
a
things
great
pivot on that.
No, it's a great financial model for them because if you lower your cholesterol, you're going to develop erectile dysfunction, you're going to develop hormone disorders and ED, you're going to develop diabetes, and you're going to develop some metabolic disorders that eventually cancer. So that's going to put you on a very slippery slope to need more drug therapy to treat the symptoms associated with cholesterol deficiency. So you're going to increase the share of wallet of that customer, you're going to increase the lifetime value of that customer, and that's what for-profit companies do. And big pharma is the best at it. They participate in a multi-trillion dollar global industry and they get you on this hamster wheel and they never let you off. And we got to do better. We can do better.
Yeah, well said. I really appreciate that. Going back to nitric oxide, is it fair to say that this is a more modern problem? And if so, what has happened in our lives and lifestyles that have caused such a problem as far as nitric oxide deficiency goes?
Well, once we understood how the human body makes nitric oxide, then we could begin interrogating what leads to a loss of its natural production. Right. And so we know that there's an enzyme found in the lining of the blood vessels. In fact, it's found in many cell types throughout the body. But we understand the enzymology and the biochemistry of this enzyme. And so things like a high sugar diet, high carbohydrate diet, sugar sticks to things. It sticks to hemoglobin. We see that as hemoglobin A1C. But it also sticks to other enzymes, the nitric oxide synthase enzymes. So enzymes, as a biochemist, enzymes have to undergo conformational change and transfer electrons from one molecule to another. And if it's stuck together with glucose or glue or sugar, it can't do its job. So we develop these enzymopathies. So high sugar, high carbohydrate diet disrupts it. Drug therapy disrupts it. Cholesterol lowering medication inhibits nitric oxide production. Things like antacids, the proton pump inhibitors, shut down nitric oxide production. And then we've also discovered about several decades ago that the bacteria that live in and on our body produce nitric oxide. So now anything that's antiseptic, like overuse of antibiotics, antiseptic mouthwash, antibacterial soaps, wipes that kill the bacteria on the skin, fluoride in the drinking water, fluoride in the toothpaste. It's a neurotoxin, it's an antiseptic, and it kills your thyroid function. So all of these things we've been able, and others have been able to demonstrate that it kills the bacteria, the good bacteria, decreases nitric oxide production. And now we have clear data showing that people who use mouthwash kills the good bacteria in the mouth, decreases nitric oxide production, their blood pressure goes up. 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash every day, and 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. This is not only an association, it's causation. And so if you're using mouthwash, you have to stop. If you have fluoride in your drinking water, which 72% of the municipalities in the US have fluoride in the drinking water, so we got to do better. Again, fluoride provides no benefit. And what's the risk? Kills the bacteria in your body, on your body, shuts down your thyroid function, and it's a neurotoxin. So we have to get rid of fluoride. And then if you're taking an antacid, you must stop. We have to, your body cannot do its job without stomach acid production. And there are 200 million prescriptions written for antacids every year, and 2 out of 3 Americans take an over-the-counter antacid. And we wonder why we're sick. Without stomach acid, you can't break down proteins into amino acids. You can't absorb iron, selenium, chromium, iodine, zinc, B vitamins, and it's causing severe chronic disease. And we got to
Yeah.
do better.